Hello everyone, Attack Power here with a controversial video, I think, to say the least. So today we're going to be diving into all of the, well, at least known, the ones I know off the top of my head, known exploits that you can take advantage of in Steel Division 2. Now, none of these are like cheating per se, because they are in-game, but none of them are really the way the game was intended to be played. Or, I mean, some of them are and are just kind of dumb, but they're there. Okay, and again, some of these, I'm using the word exploit as a bit of a stretch. So before you go into the comments and tell me, oh, this is not an exploit, you know, I'm just trying to make everyone aware of all the little things you can do in the game to eke an advantage. I'm not saying I support some of these. I'm not a big fan of necessarily making this video, but I do think it's crap that top tier players know to do these things or know how to do these things if they want to. And, you know, someone who's like a mid-tier player, and certainly someone who's newer, who shouldn't be worrying about this anyway, but newer-ish players or mid-tier players may not know what's going on, and they may expect certain mechanics to work certain ways. And then some of these exploits just kind of break those mechanics, and you know, that's really not fair. So this video is meant to be informative. I'm not supporting or bagging on any of these particular exploits, although I may mention here and there I just don't like this one, or I do it myself, or I don't do it. You know, some of them are very helpful, and I don't think horribly game-breaking, but certainly have an effect. And some of them are, you know, cheesy, or I've never done them, so I can't say for sure. So we're going to start with number one here, and this is the TNT exploit here. This should be happening in a little bit. So essentially how this works, what should happen when a flamethrower unit comes up against a grenade throwing unit? The flames should force the grenade throwing unit to move, therefore forcing it to wait to throw its grenade. Okay, so like you can't throw the grenade on the move, so the flames cause the grenade throwing unit to move, the Pioneer in this case, to move, and they can't throw their grenade while they're moving. Now, the second they stop moving, they will then throw their grenade, but it still buys the flamer unit time to move or to do more damage, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you choose attack ground, so you give the Pioneer the attack ground order on the flamer unit, the Pioneer, the grenade throwing unit, will no longer move when the flames hit it. So we should see this here momentarily. We're going to try to put on the orders here so we can see. If you're in a replay, by the way, you can click shift to see the orders. Just a small little fact there. So you can see he did a ground attack. Now the unit, well, he's goofing around here a little bit. He's moving in. The flames will shoot. He's on ground attack. We'll see the flames shoot here. He gets hit by the flames, and the Pioneer does not move and then throws his grenade. Normally speaking, this would have died most likely to this flamer unit before he got that grenade off. But because he was ground attack, we can see it here again. He's getting hit by the flames, and he is not moving. And therefore, he gets the opportunity to then throw his grenades. The concept is supposed to be when the Pioneer is hit by the flames, he is forced to move and potentially could move out of range and then have to restart his whole grenade throwing process. So this exploit where you ground attack on the unit kind of breaks the rock, paper, scissors shoot of the woods fights. Now, I personally do use this exploit for a lot of divisions. It's kind of necessary. Like your CQC units suck so hard, your Pioneers or grenade throwing units like all you have. So it's almost like, I don't want to say it's necessary, but it really helps those divisions fight better in the woods. So while I do think, while I wouldn't mind if it went away, none of these are going to go away, by the way. All of these are like core game mechanics in the game. So the likelihood of them ever getting changed is almost zero. You know, this can help you win forest fights that you wouldn't normally win against units that have, say, double flamethrower or something. It is pretty strong. It does reward the player who's really on top of their micro. I do respect that from the exploit. Part of it is, you know, it is a micro-intensive move to play. Not only do you have to go back in and then get the ground attack on, you have to be ready to stop the ground attack, because they'll keep attacking the ground otherwise, unless you stop them. All right, so our next exploit here is one I actually did not know about till recently, and this exploit is actually the one that kind of prompted me to make this video, because there's a bit of a debate going on in the community about the rightness, the okayness, whether this should be used. Now, this apparently has been around, but not many people knew about it, and only a couple of players in the community knew about this hack. Apparently, some of the Chinese, like Chai Chan, we've all seen him play crazy stuff. I guess all these Chinese players sit around and figure out every exploit the game has. But so this one's a little bit, I think, harder to pull off and even more micro intensive, but apparently it can eke out a pretty noticeable edge. Now, it's not happening here. I do not have a clip of it happening, but essentially any unit with HE, so autocannons, the LMGs on an infantry unit, the machine guns on a tank, like, a Sherman with its 50 cals and stuff, any unit with splash damage automatic firing weapon. So we're really not talking about the big gun stuff. We're not talking about the big boomy HEs. We're not talking about the 2K stuff. That stuff works the way it works. It's irrelevant what you do with it. But these autocannons, so for example, this Panzer 30 AT, if you ground attack on a unit, so like instead of letting this unit just sort of attack this unit here, like this Voltigeurs, if you choose ground attack and aim directly at the unit, so directly at the model on the map, so in this case, you'd have to like choose the building, it will noticeably increase the damage that this autocannon car will do. It works the same with the LMGs on an infantry unit or something. It will noticeably increase the suppression and damage that the unit then applies. Now, the effect is less so for infantry on infantry combat, although apparently it does make a difference. It's noticeable, apparently quite noticeable, when using autocannon cars on specific targets. So what's happening in terms of the exploit, like what mechanically is going on? This is not cheating. Again, this is the game mechanics. We're exploiting the game mechanics. There's a mechanic in the game that causes splash damage. We all know this. So when a round misses its target, it still causes some suppression and it still causes some amount of damage onto a unit. So when you ground attack, the unit is no longer affected by accuracy, and all of the splash damage is automatically applied to the unit itself. So when a unit is normally attacked, it's sort of a mix of some splash damage and some direct damage from the actual hits of the gun, and the other hits don't count as much, and I don't know how the math works out, but apparently when you ground attack, all the damage is then splash applied to that unit. So and that works again for infantry LMGs, HMGs on tanks and things like that. In other words, you can very quickly damage, eradicate, pin down units using autocannons and stuff. You can see how this is not doing a lot of damage to this infantry unit, but apparently if you use that hack, it will drastically increase the amount of suppression and damage on this unit. So much so that even like an HMG can potentially at close range pin down light armor with the machine gun sort of stuff, which is really not how it's supposed to be. This is the most exploity of the exploits here that we're going to talk about today. I'm not a huge fan of this one. This one does sound a bit cheesy to me. Yes, again, you're being rewarded for your micro. It just feels very generally game breaking. The TNT throwing is a very specific, like you're in a forest with a grenade thrower versus a flame unit. That's when it comes up. It's micro intensive to start, so you're kind of being rewarded for that micro. This feels like a very generalized, like every single fight can have an effect by this. Again, it's extremely micro intensive. Like you need to be turning on and off your ground attack. If the opponent moves, the effect is completely lost, right? So it does not work on units that are moving. So like your unit will just keep firing at the ground if the unit moves at all. So there's definitely minuses to this one. And I think that's probably why we don't see it much, because again, it is just extremely micro intensive. I don't see it. I'm not a fan of it, but I also don't see it being extremely useful for the average player. Maybe the guy with 1,000 clicks a minute can do it, but I don't see myself ever attempting or doing it, because it just seems, A, again, a little gamey in my opinion, like overly gamey, and B, I just think too much effort for me to say it's worth it or not worth it. So yeah, that's exploit number 2. All right, the third one here, our third exploit, this one's an exploit. I am not a fan of this one. I do not approve of people using this exploit at all. I think it is extremely cheesy, and I hope people do not use it. But again, this is an informational video that everyone understands that these things do exist and can be affecting gameplay. So this one is called the sound exploit. So essentially, in Eugen games, and technically I'm pretty sure this works in Warno and everything, you can find enemy units by listening without sight. So if we go to Drago Tango's point of view, that's the red guy over here. We see this Panzer coming down the road here. Okay, when I press play, he should disappear. Okay, and if I zoom in here, it's frozen. I can hear this unit going down the road. If I pause it here and back up, he should be about in that location. Neutral. There he is. So the sound exploit allows you to find enemy units without seeing them. It is extremely cheesy. I wish it did not exist. It's the same here. We can look here. Okay, we can just leave it on. We go Drago. This should be disappearing momentarily. There we go. Oh, he can still see this unit. Well, that defeats the purpose of that, doesn't it? Well, we'll hop back up to this one here. You can see it coming down the road here. We're going to go to Drago. We can still hear it. And now it's gone, right? Because it's gone down the road. So this is called the sound exploit. It allows you to pinpoint enemy units without line of sight using the sound of the engine. I can't say this is super useful during a game, but it can be extremely exploitative at the beginning of games, like where the opponent is putting large amounts of forces. It's possible you may be able to hear where they are hiding certain units or what roads they're really piling units up on. Yeah, not a fan of that one. I've never used it myself, and I never will. I think it really just breaks the whole point of the game where you're trying to figure out what your opponent's doing, not by listening to the in-game audio, which obviously you would not have in real life at all. It's extremely cheesy. But yeah, that's called the sound exploit. It is possible to pinpoint enemy units by just simply zooming in and listening really closely. All right, so our fourth quote-unquote exploit, this one is not an exploit. So this is not one where like the game mechanics are not working right. This isn't how Eugen intended it to work. I just hate it, and I've complained about it a million times, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But hill depression, I call it hill depression. Essentially, when a vehicle, specifically a tank, is on a hill and it cannot angle its gun far enough to shoot, it'll just sit there aiming forever and never fire. So he actually corrected it by moving up onto the hill to stop it from happening. But it happens on this hill on Orsha East all the frickin' time. If you are anywhere on this back half of the hill and you try to shoot up onto the hill, the tank will just sit there and stare at it because apparently it does not have the angle. Instead of it continuing to move forward to a position that it can fire, it will literally just sit there. So it is possible to exploit where you set your units up where your opponent is forced to move onto certain parts of the hill to fight you that they just cannot fire. Again, it's an exploit. Technically, it's the way Eugen meant it to work. It's awful. I wish they would get rid of it, but it is what it is. But technically speaking, it is an exploit. Like, you can cheese that mechanic, forcing your, especially on this map here. There's a couple other maps where it comes up really often. Sedilcha comes up pretty often, where you end up on these hills and nothing can fire because they're just too angled, and every tank can't apparently angle its gun right. And I'm not saying that's not historically accurate. It's just stupid for the game. It does not work well. It's a bad mechanic. I don't know anyone who likes it at all. But yeah, it's something you can definitely cheese if you are really positioning your units well. All right, so our fifth exploit here is, again, not really an exploit. It's just a super high level microplay, but it feels exploitable if you can figure out how to do it. So like if you can make it happen, it does feel very exploitive. It feels very cheesy to do. It again makes sense in the game mechanics, and it's a very rewarding microplay, and I don't actually judge anyone for using this one, but it is very hard to pull off, and it does feel cheesy when it happens. So essentially, when fighter bombers specifically come in for a target, okay, I don't have video of this. It doesn't happen often. We did see it in a couple casts a few months ago. Specifically, I remember Chai-Chan doing it several times, actually. When fighter bombers come in to target something, if your unit pops smoke just before, well, truthfully, anytime before the plane is coming in, so anytime in this diving pattern here, you can actually force it to not fire, not drop its payload. So if he popped smoke here and it popped off, this Focke-Wulf would not drop its payload. it would basically just fly over and hold on to the bomb because it lost, quote unquote, lost line of sight. Even if it's ground attack, it lost line of sight on the ground it was going to attack. So the plane will just fly over the unit. So if you have a unit with smoke and you see a fighter bomber coming, it is plausible, very micro-intensive to do, but very plausible to pop smoke in front of the unit, and the bomber unit will no longer drop that bomb in that moment. Again, I don't frown on that one. It's really impressive if you can pull it off micro-wise, and it makes, from a game mechanic standpoint, it makes plenty of sense. There's nothing like super cheesy about it, but in the moment, it's like, so the bomber wouldn't drop his bomb just because some smoke showed up. Like, I mean, if that, from that perspective, it feels dumb, but it is an exploit you can take advantage of, that the smoke of a unit can stop the bombs from dropping from a plane if timed well before those planes drop those bombs. Our final quote-unquote exploit here is the defensive fire exploit, and it's not an exploit, it's just the AI, but a lot of players don't understand that this is what's going on when the opponent magically targets their stuff. When you are being shot at by RD or something, if you choose defensive fire from the AI choices and put it over where you know the opponent's stuff is, your AI will automatically, your units will automatically target anything that fires within that circle. So they'll shoot at artillery that's firing in that circle. It's a good way to kind of manually choose which artillery to counter battery. If you just choose counter battery AI order, it'll just pick whatever artillery piece it picks, which can be kind of annoying if there's like light and unimportant arty you don't really want to kill, and like heavy arty you're really trying to get. Or maybe there's like rocket artillery that your counter battery is automatically targeting even though you know your opponent is moving it. Then you wouldn't want that. So you'd use the defensive fire to specifically get it to target units you can't necessarily see. It works the same with like 50 mil mortars and 60 mil mortars. Like if you see a mortar firing, you could put defensive fire on it and your arty will technically counter battery it perfectly. So just be aware, it's not an exploit. By no means is that an exploit. It's a very like purposefully built-in game mechanic, but I find a lot of newer players confused how the opponent's like getting perfect shots on their units that can't be seen. It's very likely they're using defensive fire to automatically target the units that are firing and give them accurate fire on them. If you guys enjoy this, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe. Hopefully this is informative to all you new and mid-tier players who've never heard of some of these exploits, and now you can understand why the opponent's Pioneer unit isn't moving, or a unit seems to find you quite easily or something like that. Again, it's not that every player is cheating, and I don't know very many people who are using a lot of these exploits, but certainly like the TNT one comes up pretty often. I hope people aren't using the sound one. That feels kind of cheaty to me. The second one with the ground attacking with HE stuff, that's pretty new. Well, it's not new, it's been around, but I don't know many people have known about it, and it only just recently kind of came alight to more people in general. So these are just things you need to be aware of. Again, if you're a newer player, these are not things to worry about. They're extremely micro-intensive, and you should just be worrying about getting your basic micro skills up to snuff so that you can keep up with other players in a normal sense. Thanks a bunch, guys, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.